Do not attempt to adjust your settings. We have commandeered this channel and are now streaming our pirate broadcast. This is the Pirate Stream.
Welcome to Pirate Stream Media. Joining me as always.
Do not attempt to adjust your settings.
Rookie move. I left it playing in the background. Welcome to Pirate Stream Media. Joining me as always is Courtenay Turner and Scott Armstrong here at Courtenay's lovely home studio. We have a great show planned for you today. A lot of really interesting overlaps. False emergencies, emergency warnings, emergencies we're never told about, COVID going crazy. But, as always, there's no shortage of, maniacal things happening in the world. But how are you guys today? What's going on?
Doing well. Yeah, it's crazy times. Super busy. But
busy, crazy times. It's all good. That's how I like it, though.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we're going to start off today with something very interesting. And this is, Scott sent me something about the idea of a massive emergency alert test that will be sounding alarms on U.S. cell phones, TVs, radios in October. And actually, before we even get into that, I wanted your thoughts on this. And I'll bring this up for you guys to take a peek at. What why is this not unnerving for people? Like the idea of some kind of like massive deployment, like even the idea that they can instantly access all of your electronics. Yeah. I find that really unnerving. I don't know about you guys.
It's definitely an intrusion. So on the one hand, this article in particular is talking about in response to the Maui fires, like they're pinning it on the Maui fires. I'm sure like something like this, they had in the works for a long time. They've been planning this. There's we will discuss it. There's probably some ulterior things going on, but at the same time in the article, they're like, in response to the Maui fires, we need a more robust emergency alert type of system. But it's like, dude, you've been talking for a while about all these other little emergencies you're trying to build up and plant fear in. Like Hollywood's making movies about nuclear bomb attacks and like all these things. Like they're already putting in all the work to pre-program all the fear. Mm-hmm. So this might be just another element of that, but I don't know. But then there's other stuff to it too.
Well, I think what's interesting is that just, to bring kind of focus to the two-party illusion. Mm-hmm. It's always like when it's one side, then it's like, oh, they're using it for this nefarious purpose. But I remember back in, 2019, they kept talking about how Trump was going to use the emergency broadcast system.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember, and like all the MAGA people were totally championing this.
I forgot about that. Like to be able to like send direct messages to people and circumvent censorship or something.
Exactly. Right. So it's I don't really have anything conclusive to draw from any of it, except that it's just interesting how they use it to play off both sides.
Right. But that's kind of the point of the name of our show in general, like the idea of using.
That's why I love exactly that. Right. The dialectical dissonance. So I find it really unnerving because it means they're tapping in, but it's always under the guise. I think your response was it's never about safety, right? And that's just it. It's always under the guise of for your safety. But really, if it were really about our safety, first of all, they wouldn't be creating crises. They wouldn't be covering up crises that happen, whether it be intentionally or inadvertently. And you would also have awareness drawn to local communities.
Right.
Because that's where something could actually be done. So I think you would have like some sort of a network system where it would be not just an alert. Because then what's going to happen if you get alerted? Then what? What do you do about that?
Right.
There would actually be some reliance networks communities system that were here's some like an alert about X, Y, and Z, and here's where you go, here's what you do, and here's who you contact. None of that is there. It's just, hey, we're gonna scare you and terrify you. Just access your personal device in order to do so. And great, now you know, and now you're terrified and you have nothing to do, like you have no tools or resources.
Well, on that exact note, I mean, we have a whole bunch of possible tools to utilize. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like we don't, like the idea that like you're saying that we only need that it somehow is insufficient now is it's false, right? And that's the interesting part. Yeah. And to the point about Hawaii in general is that when that happened, let's remember that it's the largest system in the world, and it's been had more money put into it than anything, and then it fails. And now because it fails, and because it fails, they get more money. How does that always work out that way? When it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, you give them more, and it's the same way.
It reminds me of like the cancer, the National Cancer website. Like they talk about how the problem has increased by tenfold, and they expect it to be, increasingly exponentially, increasing. Mm-hmm. But that was redundant. But that's basically what they said. Like the problem is just going to continue to get worse and worse exponentially. But we've received more money than ever in history, and we need you to donate more, even though we've done nothing to solve the problem.
Yeah,
but don't worry, just keep giving us your money, and we will eventually solve this problem.
Or give us some money, because it will fail again tomorrow, and you have to give us more money, and it just goes around and around and around. But so the point in this discussion is, obviously, as we were joking about before, it's that they're always happy to warn you about emergencies, but then when the emergencies happen, they seem to ignore them everywhere. East Palestine or anything else we're talking about. So on this in general note, like just before we go past it again, the idea is the invasiveness. They're using their technology to be able to dictate the message, especially how about when you get to a point to where things go down, social media is not working. Don't worry, we can give you the narrative we want you to see, right? But this brings us into the interesting conversation of older emergencies. This is something inversionism. I've been giving them a lot of shout outs. This account's been doing some really, really great work, deep dives, old stories, really good stuff. And so this is in regard to something that Courtenay shared, and this is about a Cold War experimentation on people in the country. Now I'll just read this and chime in if you guys want in between this. The next story is so unbelievable, he writes. We don't think it could possibly be true, but after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the U.S. military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people of St. Louis. Now, for those of you paying attention, that's not very surprising at all, right? We've talked about Operation Sea Spray, and we'll get into some more of that in a minute. But it's just, for some people, this is almost like dismissive, like that can't be true. It must be fake news, right? And that's what's really interesting about it, is there's so many examples of this. And he says, I hope everyone understands the full weight and gravity of what's been disclosed here. The U.S. military sprayed an obscenely toxic radioactive chemical over a part of St. Louis, excuse me, with 10,000 low-income people, of course, because it would never happen in a wealthy neighborhood, 70% of them children under the age of 12. Oh my God, that's crazy. Their reasoning? They just want to do an experiment to test dispersal patterns and the geographic range of chemical or biological weapons. Same with Operation Sea Spray, by the way. We just want to see what happens, right?
Right.
Unbelievable. So we can play do you want to play the video, or you guys want to comment on it first?
Let's play the video.
Okay. If I can find it. I think this is it.
Going to be a
Nope, that's not it. Nope. Apologies. I think I grabbed the wrong video. So go ahead, give me some comments while I find it.
Yeah, while you're looking for that. This is what you're saying about how people just can't believe that it's true. The more you look into wartime research, like, it really just looks like, other than creating the chaos and the breeding ground for usurpation of power that the revolutionaries want to, that's why they fund both sides of most of these wars and revolution. I think other than that, the other thing you find is that it's a great cover to be able to do quote unquote wartime research, which really just looks like a black ops carte blanche budget to do whatever experimentation on whoever they want without any transparency. And for people who think that this is just unbelievable and that they wouldn't do it, you don't have to look at the Cold War really was kind of like a minefield of that type of research. But you look at, the Vietnam War, Agent Orange, you look at, there's we could go on and on down the list, but it looks like that's really what they do during war.
Oh, absolutely.
They're doing all these type of things, and they have these think tanks that are designated to it, like the Rand Institute, the Stanford Research Institute, all under, they're kind of like subsidiaries of Tavistock, which was created to garner propaganda for people to support war. So,
and it's interesting overlap with the Tavistock Institute and the transgender movement, and it's in everything, it seems.
Well, their initial agenda, like one of their first platforms, was the women's liberation movement. That was like a main agenda and initiative for the Tavistock Institute, and it was because they want you to subvert Western civilization and Judeo-Christian values and principles, because they thought that by doing that they could have a hold over civilization. And they noticed that women were empowered by Christianity, so that was one of their
interesting.
I can't have that.
Yeah, that. Well, it's just,
and so sorry, I'll just add one more thing. Empowered, like actually empowered, and empowered for what is intrinsic to being female and femininity, not in the sense of the feminist movement, because that is
Right,
actually
right.
an inversion. It's a lie. It is the illusion of empowerment, but it actually disempowers both men and women and destroys the family,
Of course
destroys
it does.
humanity.
Right. The point, it seems, right?
Yeah.
But to your point about whether they would do this and so on, I mean, it's really interesting that, in my opinion, and this isn't even that hard of a sell for most people, I think that's what these things, it's just not a byproduct. This is deliberate experimentation on the people of this country, and it's been happening our entire existence. I mean, you really go back to the very beginning. You go back, I mean, 1,000 different ways. We could talk about the families that have been existing long before the United States, or even just the wartime experimentation. Israel's a great example where they publicly do this. They sell their weapons that they use on Palestinians as battle tested. It's a public conversation. Everyone, it's despicable. It really is, using people that way. But here's an example of a classic. This is Cold War era testing on Americans that we know about, and yet still it's dismissed by most people. So let's take a look.
Story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making
Well,
that's interesting. I was talking to Courtenay earlier. I mean, didn't they poison the whole city with LSD too, St. Louis? But I remember hearing about this story, and then I looked this up here. So there's another situation where the CIA went to this French town in 1951 and put LSD in the bread and just poisoned the whole town with LSD. The whole town was struck with mass hallucinations and insanity, right?
In France?
Yeah, in France.
I bet you that's happened so many more times than we can prove.
Yeah.
Right?
I actually firsthand know someone. It was her brother who was poisoned with LSD in a cup of coffee.
Wow.
And he spent the rest of his life in an insane asylum.
Jeez. Well, that would be extra traumatic, because if you know that you're going to embark on a trip, right, then it would be more intentional, and you're kind of prepared for it. But if you automatically have no idea what's going on, you all of a sudden just go into this insane hallucinatory psychotic break state, then that might be hard to come back from. If it's if you're
he never
poisoned
did.
with it.
He
Yeah,
never
that's
recovered.
crazy.
I've actually, my past was pretty, I've played around a lot, but that I actually never ended up doing that when I was a kid. Yeah. But there's interesting, I would argue that it would have to be too much to end up with that kind of an effect, I would think. But interesting stories. This is my brother, one of my best friend's brother, when he was in high school, got LSD and put it on his sister's tongue while she was sleeping. And she woke up and just flipped out, but she's fine. But just think about, I can't even imagine what the mental state would be. Now, thinking about that in the context of in your water, or unawares about what you're drinking or eating and what that might do. And then examples in the past of things that we don't associate as a test or LSD. And we go, what happened there? Right. People even going back, things like the witch trials or things like that. Not to say that's connected, but these big events throughout history that we think we know what happened.
Right.
When they're doing stuff like that. I mean, I tell you, I bet you it's happening right now somewhere in the world. That's terrifying to me. Yeah. Well, on that note in general, though, I think the real point about all of this is that they're capable of these things, right? Yeah. They can do this. They have done this. And obviously, so think about whether they might be doing it now, right? That's kind of where my mind goes with that.
They just have complete disregard for human life.
Yep.
I mean, that's really the common thread to me. It's well, why? Oh, just because we want to see, just to see if we can.
Right.
And
the actual stated narrative, basically.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Let's just see. We want, just because we can.
Yeah.
And I think, it gets even worse because really it's not just to see if they can, but that's bad enough, honestly, because you obviously have no regard for human life. You just want to test on them and use them as cattle. But I think it gets worse because then they want to be able to see what are the results of that and how can we leverage that to control people to, whatever means whatever agenda they have at the time.
Right. Right.
That.
Yeah, it's pretty despicable. It's pretty dark. I mean, what they're really doing is absolutely breaking their. I mean, obviously, it's framed from the idea we're doing this so we can protect you. We're doing it to find out where the weaknesses are, so we can do a better job at it. But we're going to use you as the fodder to figure that out. Which is, you could literally argue that might be the logic of what's happening. We're going to give you these injections. It might kill a bunch of you, but we'll figure out how to protect you the best. Right? Some of them think that. I don't think that's even on the table. But it goes into some other examples of this. Right? So here is a good example in the past. I wrote about this in 2015, October 20th, entitled "The Worst Nuclear Disaster in U.S. History Kept a Secret." Now, I remember writing this at the time. And if you look at it, I mean, of course, YouTube video is gone, big surprise, but it's NBC, right? And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a big, like, I look it up, it's like an open secret, but I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a big story, And everyone's like, that's a conspiracy theory. That's fake news. I'm like, it just blew me away at that time, even how willingly people would dismiss this kind of stuff. And just for those that are interested, here is the Arkansas Democrat Gazette talking about this in 2012, saying that they learned it about. Oh, I'm sorry. This is actually I had them out of order. This is the article discussing the Cold War, just so people can have that, so they can. It's not just a video, right? Here is the ABC report. Same thing. I'm sorry about that. This one, LA's Nuclear Secret Part 1, 2015. It's just wild to me that it can be such a public thing. Now it says tucked away in the hills above the San Fernando and Simi valleys was a 2,800-acre laboratory. Think about that. With a mission that was a mystery to the thousands of people who lived in its shadow. I mean, this is the same as Fort Detrick, where you can prove there's all these overlaps around the area. Actually, I should play that video next. But so the point is that this is a nuclear reactor that they know was causing a problem, and they still don't tell people that. They live right around this area. To this very day, it is still an issue. Here's the NBC4 I-team. It's the same team that did this Cold War report, right? So they're finding all these reports, and people just don't seem to care. I mean, it's kind of unnerving, Yeah. And you guys think about, the overlap there. And I'll get into these.
I mean, just the fact that they just completely just ignore it and just try to sweep it under the rug. I mean, this media outlet's reporting on it, but then we don't hear about it anywhere else. So like, how complicit is the rest of the news about it? And like,
good point. Why isn't anybody else talking about it?
Why isn't this like a big deal? Like, why isn't this like an environmental issue? Why isn't this being like shouted out? And as we've seen, like you said, your extensive recording on the Ohio incident and Maui, it's like, we know that, like, it seems like at this point, their prerogative, instead of fixing situations or helping people or rescuing people, is to cover up. So these institutions, maybe it's worth going back and examining what's the point of having these institutions anyway when they don't protect you, they just protect themselves. Their initial first thought is like, oh, how do we cover our asses every single time, And so it seems like that's like the same deal. Like they're just this long-term agenda to cover their own assets.
Well, I would add to that they're supposed to be reporting the news, but it sounds like their job is more to cover up the news.
Exactly. I'm willing to bet you most people there almost have come to terms with that.
Yeah.
Like you talk to people like Allison Morrow, and she'll be like, oh, they know. They're aware that they're, either pulling their punches or some level between those things, or outright lying,
Yeah, it would have to be.
It's nuts.
Well, I think that some of it is because they laid the ground for some of this stuff, like with the LA nuclear secret. So they may be doing things intentionally, like the testing is a good example of the St. Louis. And then they cover that up because then when a story is revealed that, because that one remained quote unquote secret. I mean, obviously we have the reports now, but you didn't know about it at the time. But I think they keep that as a undercover, so that when something like Maui happens and they cover it up, we would never suspect that they did it intentionally.
They have a long history of this.
Exactly.
Right. Well, and here's the other thing about the LA, like, so again, this is from, not immediately after, but a while ago, right? So this has been an open secret for a while. I tend to think it's more about saying, like, I bet you they didn't lean into this. They didn't really publicize it, didn't really get pushed anywhere. It's there, though, if you know where to look. So the average person's going to go, that can't be true. That's probably fake news. And so they have it, though, kind of like the revelation of the method kind of an idea. That's where I kind of think that tends to go. And here, let's play this 20-second clip. This is Fort Detrick. You have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, yeah, I agree with the revelations method. I think they have to show you, but they didn't report on it. I mean, it wasn't a mass story. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge part of that people we ignore, that, you know, they want it to be seen, but disregarded more so than, you know, anywhere on the other side of those things. That's what I would argue. And same kind of overlap. This is Fort Detrick. Again, this is, my mind you can't miss the overlaps here around the COVID-19 illusion and all the stuff we've seen. And this is just a clip. I'll make sure to include the full documentary about this, where the guy's talking about how his family and everyone around him gotten cancer and his life's been ruined, all because they live so close to Fort Detrick, you know? And so it's just the new version of these old kind of things. Right. And there are people in Georgia, the country, who will tell you that they've been tested on by the labs in the US government. I mean, Russia will tell you, but then they dismiss it because Russia said it. For their entire lives, all around these areas, and they see weird colored smoke coming out of the area, and then everybody gets sick. I think they're testing on people, right? And this is what they're dealing with.
We have over 1,300 documented cancer victims right now, just in a 1 mile radius. I'll be quite honest with you, it's changed my life so radically. Sometimes I don't even know who I am.
1,300 people in a 1 mile radius. And what's causing so much sickness? It turns out all these victims have one thing in common. They live next to a military base called Fort Detrick.
Isn't that nuts? And you watch the full thing. I mean, it's mind-blowing, the evidence that just get talking to people and they're like, oh, we don't drink the water. Everybody knows you don't drink the water around here. It's like open secrets, man. It's everywhere. Wow. And so this brings us to the larger point about the many times they've actually admitted to this. Now, this was a repost back when we were reposting from a lot of people. What was the date on here? On Last American Vagabond, 2018. And this is from the Free Thought Project. The U.S. Army has admitted to conducting hundreds of germ warfare tests on Americans. In fact, they admit to, and you can prove, at least 239 germ warfare tests. And that's bacteria, just pathogens, bacteria, you know, like Operation Sea Spray is one of the ones we all know about. Where they admittedly said, oh, we just wanted to see what would happen so we could better protect you, right? But every single one of these times, people get hurt, people get sick, you know, and what have we benefited from this? People make the argument even today, not the argument, they state the fact that these whole, like the PREDICT program and, you know, being able to tell us what the next virulent thing will be, never have yielded any positive results, because that's not what it's actually doing. They even make the point about the COVID-19 discussion is they spend billions, most likely, on this whole project, which includes people like Anthony Fauci. And then who told us about the beginning of this, whether real or not? China did. So they didn't actually even do what they were paid to do, which is go, we identified the problem before it was a problem. Right. So I don't think that's actually what they're doing. Right. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
It's just shocking that, you know, you said 239, like what the heck?
Provable.
Like provable.
Like way more than that.
I've ever heard. That's like the most insane thing. Like that, I've known that there's a history, and you know they have a tendency to do that sort of thing. The 239. Didn't you have an article about that too? Didn't you?
Yeah.
About that too? I don't know if you're gonna cover that next, but like, yeah, I mean it's right there, 239 times, dude. I mean, so the fact that anybody's still under the impression that they wouldn't do such a thing, like that's shocking.
Right. Right. Well, this is the one you read. What I did here was just basically, I think this was just an episode I did, but I repackaged that concept where I called it In Coronavirus We Trust, medical surveillance state for a government that's experimented on you 239 times. And it's just like, it's kind of mind blowing, like even overlapping again with those first points. We know this is real, and yet people just can't wrap their minds around it, you know, or at least that's the illusion we're sold, and we can't collectively look beyond the lie we're being told, however you look at that, you know.
This is the government who did MK Ultra.
Exactly. You know, and still is, actually, right?
Yeah, I would argue still is, yeah.
So is this security test that's coming out October 4th, is this another test? Like it's another test, a mass deployed test, but is there any further implications of that? Right.
Well, I think it's like data mining.
It could be data mining.
A real life exercise, like Pompeo would say.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And then something's going to go live that day, probably, or something like that.
Yeah, right. That's how it tends to go, right? Pentagon or the 9/11.
And exactly.
I was getting that more so. So I first heard about this through memes. So like I thought this was a security alert. I was like, that's where I get a lot of my news and memes. I'm like, oh, nice. Okay,
the way the world works today.
I need to look into this a little further. But anyway, shout out to Matt Landman over Spiro Protection Clothing. He was the one that I saw a meme that he posted about. I'm like, oh, I need to look into this because he's in the whole EMF world, you know, all that stuff. And so he was saying how if you want to protect yourself from the alert, get one of our Faraday bags, right? You know what I mean? So
everybody should.
Get your Faraday bags going so your phone doesn't intercept that message. But you know, all the conspiracy people, you know, are like, well, is this going to trigger like the graphene oxide in everybody's you know, this and that. And I'm like, so who knows what the implications are beyond just it being a test or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Well, the test part of it is super interesting too in and of itself. Like you mentioned, historically, it's very common that those things like nobody ever thought of planes flying into buildings. It's like, well, you were literally doing a test on that on the day of 9/11.
I know.
Yeah, you did. And
Like
any other
a few
example.
hours earlier, like,
and they know that.
and then it happens.
And so the question is that going to be the day where it's like the release?
Well,
luckily
what
we're ready
about
for it.
COVID?
You know,
They did all those Eventual One, Crimson Contagion,
Right.
right? I mean, on and on.
well, but see, this is different. That's like a
Early start.
pandemic exercise. This is like the emergency test where
Right.
like, so it's another side of this discussion. I just saw military deployed in some local town. They do those weird little things where they pretend they're like, there's no real need for that. They can do that on a military base. They don't need to be in your live streets. It's about conditioning us, I would think.
Oh, totally.
But that's a very different thing, you know? So I wonder where you think that
I
goes.
think it's kind of similar, though. I mean, the pandemic test, it just wasn't necessarily a military exercise, but I think it was kind of the same as a live exercise. Oh, and then it just happens to be a few months later that this pandemic breaks out.
No, I agree. I mean, more so like as opposed to them being in their little shelter, in their, you know, bunker, pretending being on the streets or getting your thing on your phone. Like it's a real live exercise, you know, but I agree. And I definitely think there's some overlap to that. But going to what Scott's point there. Oh, good. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to have one more thing because when we were talking about you know, the experiment, the government that gave you MK Ultra, right? I mean, and this is just a theory, but when you look at Operation Paperclip, it looks a lot of the scientists who came over here were supposedly going to NASA. They were, you know, rocketry, telemetry, but when you look at a lot of the ones that are not as well known, it looks like they brought over a lot of bioweaponeers and biochemical.
That was from
experts.
Japan. That's Dr. Ishii, right? We've talked about that. That's
exactly.
It's unit. I forget. Was it 3? I forget the unit number now, but that Dr. Ishii was the general and he controlled the bio warfare program.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet you there was overlap from the Nazi side too.
I think so too.
But he was the one that was doing. I mean, it's quite frankly unbelievably worse than what we hear from the Nazi side. Not this. I mean, there's probably all sorts of things we don't know about. Right. But what he was doing is like the stuff of nightmares, like live performance, biological manipulation, horrifying stuff. And that to your point, those both became the basis for what they later did. Both NASA and then the bio warfare program started with Dr. Ishii. And it's horrifying. Like you're not the good guy if you're pretending to fight the bad things, but then you covet all of the worst parts of what they are and make them yourself.
Well, and I feel like that's basically what defense, like quote unquote defense, has become, right? It's basically, oh, we have to protect yourself from the enemy. Oh, but we're going to take their technology, information, research, whatever, and then weaponize it against our people. But we're the good guys. We're protecting you. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. It's like whenever I see somebody with a NASA shirt, I just want to go up to them and be like, you know, you might want to look into their early.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's just people don't want to hear it though. You know, it's such a foundational concept. But this, you know, what's interesting is you can bring the kind of advancements from the NASA side and the biological side, and then their convergence. No pun intended with the overlap of Klaus Schwab and all that, but the idea that these things are overlapping into the kind of direction they're using to control people today brings it back into Scott's reference point that I think is really interesting.
You up right now.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. This is something, and well, first, before we even get into this, for those listening that may not be new to this, there's a lot of discussion and I would argue hype and false discussions about graphene oxide, or let's put it this way, unverified claims. Yeah. But there is undeniably a huge body of work that talks about graphene oxide being the next step for vaccination delivery, which in this one we're talking about right here is like another step past that. Yeah. But it's not to be dismissed. And it's weird that when that first came out, there's graphene oxide in the injection, people would dismiss that as a completely fake, like that's clownishly ridiculous, while it was being worked on, even studied in real life things. Maybe not the COVID vaccine. You guys should ask whether that's but I have to point out, I won't say anybody's names, but
in the flu vaccine too.
Well, coming up, right? Yeah. Exactly. Well, the thing though is that there's people that came out. It doesn't matter who. You guys can probably suss it out. That came out and made these false claims that I would argue, or at least unverified claims, that it was 95% of the injection. Right? Remember that? And it was the same kind of game we talk about. The atrazine frogs turn the frogs gay kind of a discussion, even though it's rooted in something that might be true. In the case of atrazine, that is true.
Yeah.
But it made it into a clownish topic that people then pushed away. I think there's something to how that happens every time. But I've done whole shows over like the 15 different peer-reviewed studies that are like, this is the next step before COVID about how these will work. And then what you're saying, go ahead and talk about that, actually, the flu part of it. That's really important because that's now, right?
Yeah, well, but it started with the graphene oxide. So now they're talking about the mRNA, but it was back in I think it was 2018. They were putting graphene oxide into the flu vaccines.
Well, I thought that was going forward. I don't know. Maybe you're right. So go ahead. But I thought either way, we can prove that it is on the peer-reviewed study of the flu shot.
On the flu shots. Yeah. I mean, I know I pulled it up before. I can, look for that.
Don't cite me on that. You may be right.
Yeah.
I just thought it was.
But I'm pretty sure that they have that it was in the flu shots.
Yeah. So no, that's for sure.
And I think they were testing for, this goes back to like Charles Lieber's work, right?
Exactly.
Where they're using it. And of course, this leads up to, it's funny that you pulled this up because you were talking about us like picking topics. And I was thinking my topic was going to be transhumanism. And that was actually in my file. So
nice.
Yeah.
I was just trying to see if I can search for it real quick.
Yeah,
so just so people know, I'll try to grab. We'll grab that and put it in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah,
but it's in the peer-reviewed study and it listed off as being included. And so the point is, and again, it shouldn't be that shocking because they have talked about this for the longest time, being like the next step. So going back to this point, this study, this is like a whole nother step past that, though. This is what's so concerning about that. For those in the podcast, and this is from 2022, remotely controlled. This is peer-reviewed, by the way. Remotely controlled, electro-responsive, on-demand nanotherapy based on, I think it's anime, or excuse me, I did that one, anime. I want to say anime because it's what do you think, like amino? I'm thinking like amine modified graphene oxide for synergistic dual drug delivery. That's just wild. So how do you even take that from the title? What do you think that does?
Remotely controlled electro-responsive. So they're off in some other distant land, remotely controlling nanotechnology delivered through graphene oxide of some kind.
Yeah, modified graphene oxide. It's even better.
Anime modified. Yes.
Well, I mean, what a mind.
I keep saying anime too, just
I know it looks like anime. When I'm looking at it, it looks like anime.
Right.
What I look at that and see is, I've only read the abstract. I don't have access to the full article, but when I looked at it, what I thought of was, and again, I would need to read the full article to know, but it opens the door for a binary weapon with a payload.
Exactly the same thing. Charles Lieber and Robert Langer, right?
Exactly. And that's really what I think they're doing. Of course, there's the Albert, I always forget his last name, but
Bourla?
Yes, exactly.
From Pfizer?
From Pfizer, exactly. And he talks about the pills that
that was 2018.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that looks kind of like that too.
Before we go past it though, the pills that it'll basically tell somebody if you don't take them.
Exactly.
Right.
Big brother, whether you took it or not.
They claim that's about like schizophrenics, but of course it could be used on anybody.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, why are we monitoring even schizophrenic? They usually have somebody who's administering the pill. So
right.
So I don't know. That's what it looks like to me. Is it opens the door for some sort of binary weapon that has the payload activation? Because if it's remote controlled, then they can they can do direct energy weapons or direct weapons on you that way.
Well, we talked about this all for multiple shows, like like we just mentioned, the overlap. Really, this case more so the Robert Langer side of it, the co-founder of Moderna, for those who don't know, working on like the payload delivery, and that's the lipid nanoparticle mRNA instruction. And the point is that's dual use, right? So you could make that the spike protein, which by the way is dangerous and deadly anyway, or you could make it something that is immediately deadly, or something that then becomes self-spreading, which is kind of what I think we're talking about, right? But that's a weapon, right? And
totally.
So it's the dual use, the insect allies conversation. It's the same thing.
Well, and it fits the whole, if we want to call it like the Babylonian model, where they don't directly do you harm, right? They give you something and then it can be activated and that's what kills you ultimately.
Right.
But they didn't do it.
Of course, plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, yeah.
Well, let's look at this. Oh, where I was going with that too is that the remotely controlled part of it is something they've been working on for a really long time, using all sorts of different. This is where it overlaps with the stuff that people are it's impossible to sell an average person on the idea of magnogenetics and how they're using magnetics and different things. And that's what they've used. Magnetics, they've used flashing light, they've used invasive. That's the
genetics.
Yeah, exactly. That's the optogenetics. And then the invasive, like hairpin wire kind of stuff, that goes back to Charles Lieber. But that's all this is like biosurveillance, invasive stuff. But then it gets into like how they can outwardly remote control. And this is where it overlaps. And this is actually a perfect transition, actually. We'll get into
it goes even further back when you look at MK Ultra. Robert Delgado did the remote control brain interface.
Right. Well, what I was going to say, though, is it's perfect into the ferritin nanoparticle flu shot, which I want to talk about, because that is the the ferritin nanoparticle concept is what they've already used to do exactly this. So before we go to the next part, though, let's read what the abstract says. And it's very interesting. I haven't even read this. I wanted to do it, while we're live, so we can kind of respond to it. An opening, like a package opening. It says the study focuses on the development of a new electric field response graphene oxide nanoparticle system. Now, this is what I think is so concerning. Is that this is not like this is like a platform concept, like the same thing we'll get into with the flu shot for on-demand drug delivery. It's exactly what we're talking about. So you could insert something and whatever the thing of the day is. Today, graphene oxide is an attractive option adopted in various biological applications for its exclusive features such as flexibility, conductiveness, cost effectiveness, and external stimuli responsive nature. But it's fake news to some people right now. It is usual to utilize multiple drugs in cancer treatment. This kind of therapy has lesser side effects, drug resistance, and more effective than utilizing only one drug. The study aims to determine low voltage controlled dual drug aspirin and doxorubicin. Do you know what that is?
No.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Sold under the brand name, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's chemotherapy medication. Okay. So, but the point is, though, it can be anything. Like you could, if it's dual drug release, I mean, you could, that's interesting, though. I wonder why it would be dual drug release.
Right.
From graphene. So the point is from the graphene oxide surface. So the graphene oxide is the payload delivery system, it seems. Here we have demonstrated how to control the drug release rate remotely with a handy mobile phone. My God, with zero passive release at idle time. In addition, the study focused to estimate the synergism of aspirin with the cancer drug and the chemotherapy drug in the release mechanism from graphene oxide in the presence of external voltage using a spectroscopic method. I have to look that up later. Moreover, we observed aspirin and the drug inducing synergistic anti-tumor activity. Thus, our study presents a noble combination of these. So it's like they're focusing on like what they're delivering, which is really interesting. But so this is
always under the guise of helping cancer patients.
Of course, always
their umbrella cover.
And so, that's some intense stuff right there. So where do you think this goes? I mean, what do you think the logical conclusion of this is? I do not believe this is about helping people.
No, I don't think so either. You have thoughts here?
I mean, it's pretty clear that they just don't have any interest in helping us, right? And actually, you made a good point that's really interesting. It's like they don't want to cure cancer. Cancer is like their vehicle to roll all this stuff out, man. Like they need cancer patients. We see it, like the food, everything. All of this is about creating cancer. So without their little guinea pigs, they wouldn't be able to do all this crazy technocratic nonsense. So
that was the whole the truth about cancer. Griffin, right? That was his whole red pill moment. Was uncovering cancer,
well done.
The truth about cancer.
That was from that documentary series is where I learned about the idea of the fact that chemotherapeutic drugs are one of the only classification of drug where the doctor gets a direct cut of the profit. So corrupt, and what does it work like 3% of the time when it's all said and done? I know there's different versions of chemotherapy drugs, but all combined, it's like 3% success rate. Nothing succeeds at that level unless it's made to, you're forcing it in.
I think that this is, I mean, I know this sounds so paranoid, but I really do think it is much more about being able to create some sort of targeted weaponry where they can do like a slow poison or maybe fast in some cases. But
well, so that's interesting. So to what end? Because I think about this a lot. I think it's impossible not to see the depopulation aspect, right? I mean, everyone knows from the very beginning of that, and like it just doesn't seem like it fits for me. But I'm not stupid. I can see that there's levels of this happening. So to what end? If they're trying to just kill people, is it we're talking just basic eugenics, like just getting rid of the people they don't need? What do you think? What do you think the end result is?
I mean, no, I see this one as being kind of bifurcating into two possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
One would be a slow kill where they become patients. They're
money.
It's a business. Yeah, they make a lot of money off of them. They can make them sick,
and they can test on them.
And they can test them.
Yeah.
So they can use them as guinea pig. They can make them sick. They can then offer them other solutions that they have to pay for, right? They become a patient, a long-term kind of, and now they're on a whole myriad of pharmaceuticals. But I also see it as having the possibility for a direct targeted either control or weapon. So let's say, like, I'm thinking like assets. Like a government asset, whether it be like a federal asset, like the FBI asset, a CIA. I'm actually thinking somebody they can then control. You see all of these like false flags that are done by somebody who supposedly has, mental health issues. They're unstable. Now they can create that instability.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
And then they can, if they, a lot of these people seem to get suicided, they can then create the instability, but also create the time bomb. I know this sounds so like fantastical, but the technology enables this scenario to be a reality. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but it does enable that possibility, and it's very convenient to use because it's all internal and it's remote, so it doesn't, their hands look pretty clean when they do something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's hard to trace.
Obviously, it can be weaponized too. This can be something. That's one of the things I wonder if that's part of what they're trying to figure out. The ethnic focus, right?
I think they do a lot of that. Yeah.
Right. Well, but I wonder. I don't think they've been successful, right?
No,
I think that's the point. Is maybe this was an attempt to try that, went out of hand. There's 1,000 points about the Italy and Iran overlap, the weird Omicron development, and all this different stuff. There's definitely things that suggest that there was something that kind of got inserted into it. Maybe that was an attempt or a test to see. But I think that's the ideal concept for the military, to be able to deploy something like this and kill only who they want to, and I think that's part of what they're trying to figure out, quite frankly. And so this is the discussion we had about this. This was a show that I recently did on May 20th, 2023, the deadly lipid nanoparticle spike protein design, and which, by the way, I'm only thinking about this right now. I put this out before that peer-reviewed study came out that was like the platform is the problem. That's exactly the point I was seeing there, which is that design itself is very dangerous, but also the new mod RNA ferritin nanoparticle universal flu injection. So considering this overlap with the flu shot, the graphene oxide overlap, the idea that the ferritin discussion here, which in this you can find, that's what this image is actually from. The Guardian wrote about this. Here, let me just do this. You guys can actually see it, and I'll include this in the show notes, because this is important for the skeptics out there that blindly trust the corporate media, right? Just so you can see this. Genetically engineered magnetoprotein. What they're saying there is the modified ferritin, just like the modified stuff we're talking about, remotely controls brain and behavior. And read through this, the study itself.
I shared this on Facebook.
2016.
I shared it in 2020. And of course, like, people just like vultures attacking
fake
me.
News.
Fake news. I'm like, it's right in the article. Right. Like, I'm not making this up.
And if you read the study, it goes all the way to mice, where they're literally controlling the animals, right? And this then goes back to the concept of Lieber-Langer and the biosurveillance and the remote control. I mean, this is the same stuff, right? It's amazing. And this is the same type of delivery system, even then. And Americans weren't attuned to this just yet, right? So here's what we wrote about in this one, and this was specifically about this injection. So I want to talk about this. So first of all, for those to see this is Epoch Times citing this, and this is just so we can confirm this, and the full links are in the show notes. But the name H1SSF is an abbreviation for H1 hemagglutinin stabilized stem ferritin. Okay, just so we can see that, and this is in the influenza discussion. And here is the NIH release, May 15, 2023, clinical trial of mRNA universal influenza vaccine candidate begins, May 15th. Now, you'll love the fact that they don't mention ferritin anywhere in this article. And of course, because every American knows that H1SSF-3928 means ferritin, right?
Of course.
Of course, right? So the point is they just don't include that. So I find that the phase 1 trial will be testing the experimental vaccine, and that's the one they're talking about. So let's be clear. This is a ferritin nanoparticle injection.
Right.
And just to keep it quick and simple, concern is unbelievable for me. Like the idea of what are they going to be doing with these things, and is that something that is already being released? Because we just watched them piggyback a fake approval for the Comirnaty XBB shot, even though that wasn't even given. So I'm wondering what's in the next one, right? What's in the flu shot they're giving now? The graphene parts from before. This is something they're working on in May. Is that coming out next? I don't know. Where do you go with this?
Well, this is just a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I had just found this. The computer chip with built-in human brain tissue gets military funding.
So gross.
And if you read the article, that they had what they were able to do. I mean, it was almost like really makes artificial intelligence intelligent. Like it was able to do really complicated kind of maze type. So all this to say, the reason I bring this up is because it seems like this is their goal. They're trying to figure out how to get some sort of remote control brain interface. Not that they haven't done it. As I said, they did that in MK Ultra studies, but I think they want to be able to do it on a much wider scale so they can achieve their transhuman agenda.
Well, this is the biodigital convergence,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's
Exactly.
literally
Biodigital,
biological converging.
Yep.
Here, just since we have it
That's
here,
exactly
here's
right.
Klaus Schwab. That's exactly what he's telling you.
What the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
Now he goes on to say a bunch more in different ways, but the
Right.
point is you can bring up the biodigital convergence document that came out before, Johns Hopkins overlap. I mean, they're all talking about this, and that creeps me out. The real human flesh on it's like that's the transhumanism direction, right? It's what this all is. And so it definitely does overlap. So we're talking about something that not only is a ferritin nanoparticle thing, which in and of itself is concerning because we just talked about how that exact aspect can be used to control. Then we got just the general lipid nanoparticle mRNA platform, which is super dangerous in and of itself. And then we're talking about a universal flu shot. So they're literally saying this will work for any flu shot ever, which is just, so this, go ahead. What do you think?
This is BS, man.
Yeah.
I'm just not buying it.
Well, so you don't think it will apply to all those supposed viruses, or are you saying that it won't?
No, I don't think. Yeah, I just don't. There's no way. I mean, even in their methodology and in their argument, how can this thing just adapt? And I don't know, man. Maybe I just don't understand.
No, I agree with you.
It's like completely insane. It's just the illusion that this is something that's going to help. But it's like there's no method for it to actually do what they're saying it's going to do.
Well, I think, I keep saying this goes back to depopulation, right? I just really think that they want to depopulate as many as possible, and then they want to control the rest. And part of the reason they want to depopulate is because it's much easier to control a smaller population than it is a larger population.
That's fair, yeah.
And so I think that all of this, if they now put it into the flu vaccine, they've convinced everybody, and I personally do think it's a lie, regardless of what you think about, germ versus terrain theory, where we're still working on models, but to have such a conclusive certainty surrounding something that is a theoretical model, it sounds more like it's a model that's being sold to propagate fear. And of course, they've sold everybody, not everybody, but a large portion of the population that we have to be afraid of the flu, which comes around every year. But don't worry. Even though they tell you, if you subscribe to their narrative, they tell you there's over 100 billion strains of the flu every year. But don't worry, they figured out the one that they're going to inoculate you against.
Or typically 4 now. They're quadvalent, the ones they use.
But that so much of the population have bought into this, and they're like, yes, well, of course, why wouldn't you get the flu shot? So I think it's their way of targeting people that if they didn't get sold on the COVID shot, now, don't worry, like, we can get them a wider portion.
The flu seems a lot less pressing. There's a lot less, there's not as many protests out in the street against the flu vaccine. You know what I mean? It's like it's a lot more innocuous. They can slip it under the gate, right?
But people are starting to recognize these things, like where people are pointing out, hey, that's weird. There's never a random controlled trial about the flu vaccine. Why does that make sense? Well, we do it every time. It's like, well, that's not okay, right? People are suddenly starting to realize all these questions.
Waking up,
I think that we should question, all of these things. How about the fact that it's a respiratory virus and you're giving us a shot in the shoulder muscle? That's exactly what Dr. Bhakti said is not possible. Just like this, there's all these fallacies, right? So it makes you wonder what's really going on with all of these things, But so, I don't know the overlap there, but I definitely think that, as we can see here very clearly, that they're going in this direction. That they're not hiding this. It's very clear. More than COVID-19, 6 other promising mRNA vaccines in the pipeline. And I mean, it's all, and this article's from June, right? But it's just to quickly wrap it off here. This is, and obviously flu, Zika virus. What? Nice. Why? It's just such a strange, I think there's something to these. Let's not forget, Zika was this weird anomalous thing that popped up after micros, or what was it, the like mosquito and microcephaly, and then, but there's more to that. People thought there was something else going on there. I bet you this story is just as, I mean, I know it is. I covered it then. There's anomalies in Zika and that overlap, just like there was with COVID-19. Totally. And RSV, really? That was something that was almost like children were at risk, we're told, nobody else. And even then it wasn't that serious. Now suddenly RSV is infecting everybody. You know, it's like, I don't believe most of this stuff, or something they did has caused this, you know? Or cytomegalovirus, which I'm not even that familiar with. You guys know any comments on that?
It's a fun word to say, though.
Yeah. And then cancer, of course.
Cancer.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, we have the idea that they're already telling you it's going to be a game changer for livestock. I mean, this is everywhere, guys. And this is July, so it's already happening. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Very concerning to me.
Yeah. Well, I will say on that, you know, it's really encouraging because, like, with Objected, we did the whole, before the site went down, like, we were pivoting towards a big push of, like, doing, like, mRNA-free meats, try to be, like, a distributor of some kind. And we were doing a lot of research. We reached out to a lot of local farmers and tried to get, you know, onboard people that were, like, committed to never doing that. And we ran across some really cool people who were, like, from my experience, like, a lot of the farmers we talked to were like, absolutely not. Even if that means we lose more livestock, if that's the only vaccine available, then we're not going to do it. Like,
was Texas Slim one of those guys? I'm not sure. Steve talks to him a lot. I got a chance to.
I need to connect with him.
Yeah.
But no, there was just a lot of just small farms and ranches throughout the country that we reached out to, and like the overwhelming consensus was that no, we'll never go down that road.
I hear that.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was great.
Well, you know what I love about a lot of this, and Texas Slim mentioned some of this too, is that, you know, what you're seeing is these groups, you know, unfortunately, some of the very large ones, even if they want to, it's almost like they'll fail business-wise, right? But you got some of these medium to smaller ones that are like, you know what, screw the whole system. We're here. Local community, come to us. We have meat for you. And people in the community are like, hell yeah. And so they you know, don't need the system. But that's what Slim is trying to actually make, at least from what I take from I got the honor being there with him on AM Wake Up. And he talked about the idea of, you know, building that infrastructure, like locally, right? So your local community and know where to go and people can sell it. And that's, we're all talking about that, right? Peer-to-peer economies, you know, just circumventing the control system.
Totally.
But here is the, one of the things I want to include on that note, that just, you know, it's just so frustrating that we can have it this obvious as everything else. And this is September 14th, Daily Mail. Alarming rise in UK stillbirths and babies dying within weeks of being born reverses 8-year trend. I just put pretty telling that it seems to be only the experts who are baffled by this one. That's they're baffled.
And exactly. And are they going to do any sort of investigation?
Of course not.
Let me guess. Even if they do, they're going to exclude whether or not the mom is vaccinated. Like they
Scotland,
always do, right? That Scotland case. Like
right.
We reported on that.
I can't believe
that's one of the most insane, like awful things I've ever heard. And it's like because that would, and you talk about it a lot, but it's like the idea, like, okay, we have this very clear signal that something's horribly wrong. All this neonatal death is happening. And there's really only one thing that it could be doing, but that's the one thing we're not going to investigate because it would increase vaccine hesitancy.
Right.
And they're not about the truth. It's, again, a cover-up operation.
Yeah, man.
It's so crazy.
That was one of the most shocking developments in all this. Like it was plainly stated. Like, so you've got a spike in neonatal deaths. Yes. We're doing an investigation. Yes. But we're going to completely omit the one culprit that everyone looks at because, you know, she said two things. Well, we studied it really well in the beginning. And of course, we don't want to scare anybody away from taking it. I just don't understand. I think this is where I get into the point where I think most everybody's like, that's effed up. That's not true. And yet, okay, but then we stop right there. We go, oh, okay, well, everybody must see it. And then no, they just keep going forward. They go, no one's stopping us. All right, well, let's keep going. You know, it's like, I don't know how we get past that, though. It's everywhere, man.
Well, to that point, that is really interesting because even in my head, I'm like, this is all so crazy. Doesn't everybody see this? And
I wonder if they do.
No, I don't think they do.
No.
I try to keep pushing with the agenda. So
I try to be on a positive note about it, though. You know, like I don't know for sure, obviously, right? But it's like there's only two options. Either we're doomed because nobody's ever going to see it because this much, or I think that we're at a point where most people kind of do. And I think I point out all the time, right? We have those little markers like the bivalent shot or different examples where you kind of see through the narratives where everyone's like, no, screw that. And I think we have that, not with everything.
I think
but,
more people are seeing it.
Yeah.
I feel like I tend to think more people are seeing it than actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're not at the critical mass yet.
No, not at all. And that's tough. Because, like, in our little communities, all the people we talk to,
exactly, that's it.
Everybody gets it. But then as I'm driving down the road, I see like these thousands of cars. I'm like, none of these people.
Yeah. Right? Then you see people alone in their car still wearing masks.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're like, wait, really?
Yep.
Did I just see that? No.
Seriously, there's a guy near my office that this couple, they both always have the same mask hanging in their windshield, and just like every day I walk in, I'm like,
it's super
seriously
sanitary there.
I know.
Right?
God, it's so gross. It's like the worst. Whether there's something going on or not, like that's gonna get you sick.
Yeah.
I want to go stick one of my stickers right in their window and
Yeah.
like.
We're not on your list of like 50 mask studies that you
Right.
Yeah.
I've got that one I made that says like, peer-reviewed science has found that they're not statistically significant. I'm like, the more you know. Let's stick it right on the window.
Yeah.
They would know it was me. Trust me. They always see me. I'm like,
they can hear you ranting from
seriously. But I tend to like that note again, though. It's like, I definitely think there's a lot of people that are at least afraid enough to not, like, maybe they don't trust it. They don't like it. They don't want to wear it, but they will, because they don't fully understand how actually dangerous it is for them. Right. So it's like, it's just such a deceiving thing. And then you don't know if those people that you see you're being forced to, or their family wants them to, or, I don't know. I just try to give a hopeful note, right? So I think we have enough examples to see that a huge portion, possibly the majority, definitely is just kind of like, I don't know what's happening right now. Like, I'm uncomfortable. I may go along with it, but they're ripe for informing. I really think that.
Yes, I think that there are a lot of people who are at least asking some sort of question. I just really hope, because it sounds like they're going to double down and try this whole thing again.
Yeah.
And I just really hope that this time enough people are like, wait, something doesn't add up here.
Yeah, totally.
Even if they don't fully understand or fully know what the truth may be, at least just say, okay, that doesn't seem right.
Right.
And I'm not just going to blindly follow.
Yeah. And I kind of think that's what they already think is happening. I've seen a bunch of mainstream articles. They're like, please get it, even though I know you don't want to, like a lot of that kind of stuff. Seriously. And it's just like, we're not going to force you, with what they said last time too.
Right.
So I honestly don't see how it could happen again. Like how they could do the same forcing. That's where I'm kind of skeptical about. I mean, it definitely could, and they would, but this may be like a pivot to the flu shot or some other narrative, in a similar way. It's just what I worry about,
Right.
But
I think that is what they do, right? They have, we saw this with the Operation Lockstep document, right? They had the 4 different scenarios, and people keep pointing to Lockstep, but I think that they actually pulled a little bit from each of them.
Oh yeah.
But what they do is they have a bunch of it's like tools in their arsenal kit, So and then they beta test and they'll kind of feel it out. And if that's not working, they're like, okay, we'll pivot. And I think you're right on that, yeah.
And that's something people don't think about enough, is that they have multiple agendas.
Yeah.
There's 45 different angles laid out, and they decide
operational plans.
Yeah, right. And so
same agenda.
we stick a stick in the spokes about their Nazis in Ukraine. They go, okay, fine, we'll pivot this way, or whatever it is, and any of these stories, But I think a good place to end here then would be kind of giving people one of those notes that I think are an easy anomaly. And Scott's talked about this a lot in the past, and this is about the flu shot in general. Now, this is one that I saw out. This was yesterday. Doctors revealed the exact time you should get your flu shot, whatever that even actually means. You can read it. It's very weird. They're like, based on your age and whatever else. But this was just something they're really harping the flu shot. They're really trying to get people to do this. And actually, even before I do that, just really quickly to wrap it off, let's not forget. Oh, and I should say, to make sure, a very clear statement that I'm not saying that we know for sure. Let's put it this way. What they're saying is the shot they're giving is the flu shot not the ferritin shot, not even the universal one.
Okay.
I'm worried that might still be what's happening, though, just to make that clear. But they're saying they're doing, let's just put it this way. The ones they're giving currently are the ones that are the older ones, but they are working on ones that they're even saying might come out. And I'll show you that in a second, like this season. So I'm worried they're going to do a shift and we won't notice. And they're going to quietly seep it into the conversation.
When do they say is the best time to take it? Are they talking like time of day? Like after
you change your diaper?
After you change your diaper, go get your flu shot.
Yeah, I didn't highlight it, but it's
your butt diaper.
The button.
Right. Or in case you lose your bladder control because your immune system falls apart. Whatever it is. But it was something like that. Like, it's kind of, don't get it while you have a fever. And it's really just a ploy to get you to be like flu shot. Now, I'll come back to this one second. But one thing I wanted to show you really quickly. was that, let's not forget, that's the reason I said that before, the Pentagon did a study about the flu shot in general. I think at the time it was one of those, the ones they pretty much do was quadvalent. They kind of guess about the 4 most common. Half the time it doesn't work at all, if ever. But this is, Children's Defense put this out. The flu shot raises your risk of coronavirus, is plural. It's just a general category, by 36%. Now here's the actual study. And this is not a joke, by the way. This is just January 2020, just before all this.
I remember this.
Influenza vaccine and respiratory virus interference. So that means, that you take the injection and it causes you to be more susceptible to other things, right? Department of Defense. And this was about, giving this to the military and whether that would cause a problem, And the crux of the point is right in the middle of it all, examining. So they talk about other things and they say, it has the right effect we're looking for. But it says examining non-influenza viruses specifically. The odds of both coronavirus, which is the cold, this is pre-COVID-19 illusion, right? And human metapneumovirus, which I actually looked up in the past episode. There's a whole category to that, but we'll save that for another day. In vaccinated individuals were significantly higher when compared to unvaccinated. That's a huge statement. And the point is 36% increase for coronaviruses, a 51% increase for the metapneumovirus. It's crazy. And shouldn't that play a factor when, when this all kicked off and they were like, coronavirus, everybody get your flu shot. They knew this study. They pushed the flu shot, I would argue, like everything else, because it would increase what happened. I mean, every action they took seems to have increased the problem.
Well, they knew, if you, again, I'll just, suspend whatever people's beliefs are around the virus narrative, but we know that there are poisons in the adjuvants.
Absolutely.
Right? So obviously you poison someone and then they have to detox, and then you have more toxins coming at you. It's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to have a harder time detoxing.
Right. And that's one way to definitely take that data, that these things are putting your body in a weakened state and you're getting sick. It's exactly what the COVID shot seems to be doing. And here's the point, flu season is coming. mRNA flu shots aren't far behind. And just to get past it all, they basically are saying that they're already testing these phase 3 trials, right? This is happening right now, phase 3. So if this gets done and we know they're going to rubber stamp it, is it going to be kind of seeded in? Maybe they put out a real quiet article in the corner nobody points at, and it's like, hey, it's out there. Now this is the one you're getting. And they won't tell anybody that. So I'm super worried about that. And here's the one just saying that this is even better. Good. Isn't that what you said about the COVID shot? It's exactly the same point. So this, overall, that brings me to the last point. And this is what I was going to say to people, just to give them an anomaly to consider. And what we're talking about, the ones that kind of break you out of the illusion. I thought this was interesting. On that same article, doctors reveal the exact time you should get your flu shot. It says last flu season, 9 million Americans got the virus. And I'm like, wait a minute. Weren't we at a time where they were like, it was just almost 2020 vanished. 2021 was still basically mostly gone. 9 million people, like that doesn't even seem like that makes sense. And so I wanted to go through this in general. I thought this was interesting. So we've talked about this before. This one's a little bit different. I have the flu view one right here. We can talk about next. I love that one. Me too. And you make this point last time. It's really obvious. But here, first point. We've been saying this since the very beginning. Literally says pneumonia, influenza, and COVID-19 as PIC, right? And that's what they're showing this breakdown of. Now, they use that number as COVID in many different examples. I've proven that on the show. But the main part, first of all, on this ridiculous version of it, there's nothing but green and red. Look at this. Well, that's all red actually, but
it's all red.
Oh, here, just use this one since that's up too. Or no, where is it? Just jump it over real quick. I thought it was interesting that from any of the years when there is green, or I guess not.
It must be broken.
Oh no, that's the point though. It's just all red. Like
all red.
Really? Okay, well, it was going green before. Well, that's even more stupid. So it's just the point is at or above threshold. So just as one number, they're just like, you're all in danger. It's just red, the country. Wow. It just seems so stupid to me. But you can look at the deviation on this from this last year, or really this is the full breakdown. Over here, you have basically this graph that shows you the red line being what they say is the deaths due to PIC, the combination of all three, and then the COVID-coded deaths being the blue. What you'll notice is that in 2020, 21, 21, notice something very interesting. The red line, which is supposed to be pneumonia, influenza, and COVID, perfectly aligns with the COVID death number.
Exactly.
How is that not the most obvious thing in the world? That means that they 100% used what they knew were flu and pneumonia deaths, that they just say secondary pneumonia and flu. But it's ridiculous. Yeah. And then, okay, so bringing this the last point to this year, that's the year we're talking about. So right now we're about to go into the 2023-2024 flu season. But look at the numbers right there. How you tell me 9 million cases last year? That doesn't even add up with what we're looking at. So something's very fishy here. And I think even down here, look at the number of flu deaths they're claiming. 12, 8, 19. Yeah. It's like, this is ridiculous. There's something still going on. And then this is the one that, what are your thoughts on this guy? Because I think it's hilarious.
Amazing. It's just such a smoking gun to this whole thing. Like I remember we were watching, and then if you click on some of the states, like specifically like when I was in Oregon at the time. And it breaks down, per county. And I remember we were keeping an eye on it. And it was like Multnomah County, which is where Portland is at. In the winter of 2020, they'd have like one reported case, or the whole state, there'd be like one reported case in like the whole state of flu. And it's like, or influenza. It's like, this is the most insane thing ever.
Right.
And then again, if you just, you guys can go mess with this, but you just scroll back and you show
Look at
that.
Nothing.
Nothing. Because all those numbers are being slid over the COVID column.
Which we just showed you.
Yes,
right. Exactly.
And exactly what it is. And you can always look at previous, like 2019, 2018, and it's all purple and red, And so
let's go to the next one.
So of course their excuse, and there's articles about this, and when we're all of us calling out the fact that there's no influenza, they're like, well, that's because everybody was social distancing and wearing masks. So they flip it back on us. It's like, damn it.
Right. Well, but see, that's what's interesting today is now we see even the corporate media breaking down some of them, the masks not working, right? And so now they're already, I don't think many have even made that connected point.
Yeah.
So you're already finding out that that's not true. So then what happens? We know, but there's plenty of other examples where they've gotten that contradiction where they're like, where they try to get you to do the mask concepts here, but it contradicts, then that wouldn't make sense. And the fact that it stopped it there. But what's interesting in the point that you made here is that, so this is the year that this is the beginning of COVID, and obviously the flu's gone. But you show the next year or even the years before.
Yeah, like 2019.
Yeah, it's crazy. And this is actually the best year to look at, as you pointed out, because it's like all red.
Yeah, look at that.
That's crazy, right? One of the worst flu years they told us, ever.
Yeah.
And now this could be one of two things. Obviously, this could be something just the flu worse, but there's a lot, whether, this gets into the virus conversation of it, but that there are people that argue, and there's even a new study I'm going to talk about in an upcoming show where they now have, they're claiming evidence that this was circulating. And I think it was Italy before in 2019. Again, they actually got, but there's like 15 countries that say that before they saw it in China, they say, right? So that's what that could maybe be. So back to the overall point, though, is
that's
that
CDC right there, right?
Yeah, they're all the CDC,
this is
right?
Literally the CDC. This is not some crazy conspiracy site. Yeah.
So bring it.
Well, it is.
It is a crazy conspiracy.
That's funny.
I think they're some of the biggest conspirators.
But yeah, so really the point is that it's an obvious anomaly here that we can see that now it's it's all of a sudden coming back, but even then still it's just not even remotely what that one's actually, that's pretty bad. That this is this last one they claim, but it doesn't add up overall is my main point. So they're still playing with the numbers. And here's the last point. So this is really interesting. This is 2018, 2019. It's a different view by by age positive cases. So this is what it used to look like. This is why these old experts and immunologists were like, this is like wildly consistent. Summer, the winter time, and everyone gets sick. And this is exactly over the peak of the winter. There's week one right there. It's kind of winter time and then down, right? Going to the next one. This is supposedly 2020. Obviously, that doesn't look the same way. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's just vanished and then peaks in these weird times. Like, so remember, this is flu. This is not about COVID-19, and yet you got this weird spike over here.
Is that December 2020 by any chance?
This one would be whatever week 38, 39 is. So winter is right here. Week 53, 1. That's like the January, December overlap. So this is like summertime. It doesn't. This is what a lot of the honest experts.
That big spike there.
Right here.
Yeah. So that's same. Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to be week 39, 38.
Okay.
And so that's what the honest experts are saying. It's like, that's not how these things work. Right. You don't have a spike of flu in the middle of all this. They just conflated that and then bringing it to today, even more weird. Now the whole thing has shifted, right? So now what they're saying is we're already coming out of our flu season right now. And we're just getting into wintertime. Like, so you're seeing it taper down. It just, well, obviously we haven't gotten there yet. So we'll see what happens. Right. But it's interesting to see that that's already on a downward scale. So it's just, there's an anomaly here.
Yeah.
And nobody in the expert classes or even, I hate to call it the predator class, are talking about this. And so it just really screams that there's definitely something fishy going on here,
Sure.
So that's the anomaly for people out there. Ask these questions, recognize we're being played in a lot of different ways,
Absolutely. Wow. That's some good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, any final thoughts for us guys before we wrap up here? You want to shout out any plugs or anything you want to do before we wrap?
Promote now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess, well, so Ryan's been covering the Maui fires quite a bit. We objected, like Shelby, and then Stephanie Perucci Publishing has put together a book that's like a pre-order right now called Burn Back Better.
Oh, that's right.
It's
That's
like
right. It's a good name.
A very comprehensive overview of like all the information that we know right now from boots on the ground reporting in Maui. It's pretty good. I had a chance to do some proofreading on it, and like it's pretty it's gonna be good. So I think we're trying to get it out October 1st. So burnbackbetterbook.com, I think you get pre-orders there. But anyway, so
nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Unjected.com, The Last American Vagabond.
Oh yeah,
Courtenay podcast.
Right. I will shout out too. I just talked to Pasta this morning. He just left Maui, and he's going to put out a documentary he did there.
Cool.
So I say a lot of people putting stuff out, and so it's good. More information coming your way for sure.
Very cool.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's a bit away, but I'm going to be speaking at the Reawaken America tour October 14th at 12 p.m. So
rock and roll. Rock and roll.
Oh, and I do a show called Rebunked. I should mention that too.
Yeah.
I do the Courtenay Turner podcast, and find me at Courtenay.
We're out there somewhere.
Yeah.
You can find
You'll find us.
Yeah, you'll find us.
Right. All right.
What about you, Bill?
LastAmericanVagabond.com. Right. Well, thanks for joining us today, guys. We appreciate your time and your continued support. And we've got lots of stuff coming. Like we're always talking about what's coming next, and you know, but it's a slow process. But we're talking about people and who we're going to include once that time comes. We're not there yet, so those that are interested, you know, recognize that we're not just skipping over anybody. We haven't even begun that process yet, so we got a lot coming your way.
But we have done some brainstorming. We have some getting the vision much more clear and figuring out how to execute. So
yep, exactly.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you for letting us use your lovely studio.
Yes. Outstanding.
My pleasure.
Love it.
Yay.
And thank you on the producer in the back.
Right. The real hero of the show. You can't see back there.
Yes.
All right. We'll leave you with that, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Take essentially years to rebuild Lahaina, which was destroyed, but we will build it back better, and we'll build it back proudly as we do in Hawaii. We will find a way to make sure that there's more housing in Lahaina over time.